Well, it's official. I am back again. And congratulations to me, because the universe is safe once again. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, enough with the cheering. So this finally means that I can go back to making videos again. So, what's the first thing that I'm reviewing? Crap. You know, I should have just stayed in space. Oh boy, does this one have a history behind it. Well, where to start? Well, in the 1800s, a storyteller to the king of Iran named Naqib al-Mamalik told a story called Arislan. In the 1990s, this story was loosely translated into the heroic legend of Arslan, as we know it today. The story started out as a series of books, then became a manga, and finally became the anime which I'm taking a look at today, as a 5-part OVA.
The heroic legend of Arslan.
Now, the anime consists of 5 50-minute OVA episodes, and as such, it's actually a really epic tale. Very long, very drawn out, comparable to things like Beowulf or Lord of the Rings. But this type of pacing in the story can be a real downer to somebody who's not used to watching or reading something like that. As you can plainly see, just watching these first few clips has already aged me. Now, since this anime is billed as an epic, new characters, locations, and ideas are constantly being thrown at the watcher, with very little background given on them. As such, it's very difficult for me to give a synopsis of this series without going into a whole lot of spoiler details, but I will do my best. The anime focuses on the small country of Pulse, who has lived peacefully with Lusitania for several years. However, the Lusitanian army suddenly invades, and due to the poor judgment of King Andragoras, the leader of Pulse, he is captured, his queen is captured, his capital is taken, and his prince, Prince Arslan, is forced to flee the country. From there, the series follows Arslan as he attempts to regain his kingdom, gains allies, and also tries to figure out the identity of a strange man named Silver Mask, who seems to be obsessed with killing both him and his family. Now, as I have previously mentioned, this is an epic that has a huge, incomparably huge cast of characters, and because of this, I'm not going to go over every single one. Let's just go over the 5 or 6 or so characters that actually recur from episode to episode, and whose presence actually impacts the plot. First, of course, there's Prince Arislan, the main character and the one who goes through the most change over the course of the story, though a lot of that change isn't really shown to us in this 6-episode OAV. He starts out as the typical prince, very naive and very kind-hearted, which is quite surprising given his parental background, but as it stands, he is a pretty standard archetypal character, a character who's always willing to do the most good wherever he can, but his overall naivete is what brings him down most of the time. Needless to say, he's not the type to shout, "Tonight we dine in hell," every once in a while. Next, there's Darun, the prince's most faithful follower, and also possibly his best friend. He's also often referred to as the best swordsman in all the land, which is not really unwarranted as we see later on in the series. And while he tends to be much more serious and static than the prince, meaning he doesn't change much throughout the series, much like many other characters we're going to see, he does get a bit of character development near the end, and his stark pessimism and down-to-earth nature is a great contrast with how the prince acts, especially early on in the series.
I'm not going to listen to this. Die like a dog!
But then there's Narcissus, a tactician who left the royal court because, well, he didn't agree with the king's ideals. He lived out his days as an artist in the woods until Arislan came to ask for his advice and his support in trying to regain his kingdom. Being a rather vain person, he only agreed if he would receive the position of royal artist after the kingdom was reclaimed. Yeah, our hero, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's not really shown so much in the anime. It is hinted at that he's not only a tactician, but also a very accomplished swordsman and sorcerer. And then there's Eren, a young boy who Narcissus bought out of slavery. He acts as a ward and a spy for Arislan's side, and while he does act rather immature most of the time, he does play a very valuable role as sort of the voice of the audience. If a concept is introduced that the audience would not understand, Eren is the one who will ask a question about it so that we can get some background information on it. He's also shown to be quite capable in athletics and disguise, though this isn't really shown until later on in the series. Until then, he's basically just the voice of the audience.
Disobedient. It's about time you behaved a little, or weren't you taught to respect your elders?
Of course, what would a fantasy story be without a rogue? In this case, we have Give, who is the fun-loving con man of the group, and that's putting it lightly. While he self-identifies himself as a musician, he's actually more of a rogue of all trades. He's shown throughout the series to be a bard, a thief, a soldier, a singer, basically just anything you can imagine. He's also the only person in the entire series who never makes a strong alliance with anyone else. While he never directly defies Prince Arislan, it's also clear that he would work for anybody so long as the price was right. But he never goes directly to the opposition for money.
From horrible tortures by a Lusitanian priest, he lay there wounded at the vile monster's mercy till my arrow ended his suffering.
Be silent.
He's also there to make witty small talk with the sixth and final member of our Dungeons & Dragons crew. Finally, there's Ferengis, the only female main character in the entire cast, and also the only cleric, though she's also skilled in archery and sword fighting. She's probably the least developed of the 6 main characters, just because she doesn't really display much of a personality. While she does engage in a lot of witty banter with Give quite often, most of her personality is just that she shows up in battle to help them, and every now and then offers some advice to Arislan. Other than that, she really doesn't do much. In fact, what little we do learn about her backstory doesn't really come to fruition in the OVA. All we learn about her is that she was a cleric of a sacred order that was ordered to assist Arislan in reclaiming his country. But other than that, she really doesn't get much of a backstory at all. It's rather disappointing because she really does seem like a very strong, independent character, but she's really not used that often and she's not taken advantage of. So really, there's no point in using her in the OVA, especially since the OVA did not get very far into the story at all. Now, for those of you who are expecting a fun-filled, action-packed fantasy adventure full of fighty goodness, well, prepare to be disappointed, because Arislan is not that type of show. Far from it, actually. A majority of the show is actually very politically oriented and strategy oriented. What little action there is bogged down by dozens of scenes of just talky bits, where the characters are talking to each other, discussing their strategies and what's going on in the war right now. It's not that that's a bad thing, in fact I find it pretty riveting, but the fact of the matter is, it's not geared towards everyone. This is thrown to a very select group of people. It's like reading The Lord of the Rings, basically. But once again, that's not really a bad thing, because the story is very well written, it's engaging, and the dub work for the characters is actually really good too. At least in the first 4 episodes.